Today we'll get started on topic 4, pentasyllabic poetry, 19 poems. Pentasyllabic poetry, or 五言诗 in Chinese, refers to poems composed of 5-character lines. Since all Chinese characters are monosyllabic, 5-character line poetry is often translated in English as pentasyllabic poetry. To distinguish it from the older 4-character line, or tetrasyllabic poetry, represented by the Book of Poetry. In this and the next 2 episodes, I will talk about the 19 poems, the earliest known collection of pentasyllabic poems. These 19 poems are anonymous and generally believed to have been written by disenchanted literati living in the capital city of Luoyang towards the end of the Eastern Han Dynasty, which ended in the year 2020 CE. This small collection had an outside influence in Chinese poetry, as the new pentasyllabic form it introduced proved much more dynamic, flexible, and versatile than its predecessors. Soon after the Han, this pentasyllabic form dethroned the tetrasyllabic as the primary form for lyrical expression, a position it has maintained ever since. Why would the addition of one single character to each line make such a profound difference? To find out, we must first learn 4 basic facts about the Chinese written language and its evolution. First, all characters are monosyllabic. Second, a character usually carries meaning and functions as an independent word, as a noun, a verb, adjective, or an adverb. Third, a character can easily combine with another to form a 2-character compound, often called binomial by Chinese linguists, or combine with 2 other characters to form a 3-character phrase. Fourth, this combination of character into binomials and 3-character phrases were all the rage during the Han Dynasty, as evidenced by their expressive growth. This fundamental linguistic change was a great blessing to the development of Chinese poetry. It brought about an ideal convergence of sound and sense. In poetry, the basic unit of rhythm, called a foot, is composed of either 2 or 3 syllables. In English poetry, for instance, we have bisyllabic iambic foot, or trisyllabic anapaest foot, and so on. When polysyllabic English words do not often fit the bisyllabic and trisyllabic fit, Chinese 2-character compounds and 3-character phrases, in and of themselves, constitute bisyllabic and trisyllabic fit. Given this ideal blending of sound and sense, it is not surprising that the Han poets would develop pentasyllabic poetry as the dramatic increase of 2-character compounds and 3-character phrases during the Han enabled them to do so. In composing pentasyllabic poetry, the anonymous authors of the 19 poems invariably integrated 2 and 3-character segments in a line, creating a distinct 2+3 rhythm in both sounds and meaning. In addition to the major pause between these 2 segments, there's a minor pause within the 3-character segment, creating a sub-rhythm of 1+2 or 2+1. So to be exact, pentasyllabic poetry introduced 2 alternate rhythms, 2 plus 1 plus 2, and 2 plus 2 plus 1, in both sound and sense, giving poets almost as much freedom as prose writers to compose lines in ways that closely match the intricate process of recognitive reflection or emotional brooding. This is something earlier poetic forms, heavy with oral formulaic elements, never accomplish. The successful adaptation of pentasyllabic line for reflection gave rise to new poetic themes, structures, and textures. Changes that shifted the trajectory of the mainstream poetic tradition away from oral performance to written poetry over the next few centuries. With the general formal feature of pentasyllabic poetry in mind, let us now turn to individual poems and see how they work. The poem chosen for our discussion today is I Ride My Carriage to the Upper East Gate.
I ride my carriage to the Upper East Gate. I ride my carriage to the Upper East Gate, gazing at the graves north of the wall. White poplars, how bleak they are in the wind. Pine and cypress flank the broad paths. Underneath them, the dead from long ago. Dark, dark is their long night. Lost in sleep beneath the yellow springs. Come 1,000 years, they will not awaken. Seasons of growth and decay march on and on. The years allotted to man are like morning dew. Man's life is as transient as a sojourn. His frame is not as firm as metal or stone. 10,000 years have gone by. No sages or worthies can cross the flow of time. Some take drugs and hope to become immortals. Many only end their life with poison. Far better to drink fine wine and wear clothes made of choice white silk.
This poem belongs to the Poems of the Wandering Man, one of the two categories in the 19 poems. The other category, Poems of the Abandoned Woman, will be examined in episode 21. What distinguishes these two categories is a sustained reflection or brooding over human transience, a theme that was not explored in early poetry but would figure prominently after the Han. In Poems of the Wandering Man, the anonymous poets often begin with an emotional response to a desolate scene, followed by a vehement lament over human transience, and then a desperate search for a way to cope with this transience. I Ride My Carriage to the Upper East Gate is a fine example of sustained reflection on human transience. It begins with the poet's glimpse of the graveyard on Mount outside Luoyang. Poplar, pine, and cypress are all associated with the dead, as they were often planted to mark gravesites. They evoke a dark mood of melancholy, leading the poet to brood over the dismal world below. No life, only bodies from long ago. No light, just everlasting darkness. No awakening, only eternal sleep. The poet laments, quote, man's life is as transient as a sojourn. His frame is not as firm as metal or stone, unquote. What follows is a futile search for a solution to human transience. He first dismisses the Confucian pursuit of Ming, or a name, as useless, since even sages and others of great name must die just as common people do. Next, he ridicules the popular Taoist practice of taking longevity drugs, declaring that those taking such drugs will only shorten, if not end, their lives. Finally, he settles on bodily enjoyment as the only sensible thing to pursue in this world, exhorting himself and others to find pleasure in fine wine and clothes. Such hedonism abounds in the 19 poems, and seems to be a poetic rendering of the ideas advocated by the 3rd century BC philosopher Yang Zhu. Why did the theme of human transience, absent in early works, suddenly emerge and loom so large in the 19 poems? One might be tempted to give an oversimplified answer, attributing this shift to the psychological duress of confronting massive deaths from famine, war, and political persecution at the end of the Han. Or one could say it was increased self-reflexivity that led to the advent of human transience as a central poetic theme. But neither answer is convincing. Didn't the people have to confront unnatural deaths on the same massive scale during the preceding Warring State period? Similarly, it is hard to argue that the people before the Han were less reflective and therefore did not dwell upon human transience. Just think about how prominently that figures in the writing of Zhuangzi, Yang Zhu, and others. Here, a related question arises. Why was the in-depth discussion of human transience so abundant in pre-Han prose, but so conspicuously absent in pre-Han poetry? This leads us to consider the language factor for the delayed advent of reflection on human transience in poetry. In my opinion, describing a sustained reflection on human transience requires a poetic form unhindered by formulaic modules, such as incremental repetition and the rigid prescribed pauses found in the lyrics of the Chu. These formulaic modules inevitably make reflective process impossible. The best a pre-Han poet could do was to present the fragments of reflection through incremental repetition. But with pentasyllabic poetry, it is quite a different story. Free of the built-in formulaic modules, the pentasyllabic form achieves an unprecedented level of syntactic fluidity. These two alternate rhythms, noted at the beginning of this talk, allows two syntactic maneuvers not possible before. First, to place a verb in any position of a 5-character line, and second, to use 2 or more verbs in a line. As clearly shown by the color coding in the Chinese text, the author of I Ride My Carriage to Upper Eastgate apparently took full advantage of this new syntactic possibility. His verbs were never in the same position in the adjacent lines, with the only exception of one parallel couplet. And at the end of the poem, the poet employed 2 verbs per line in 3 consecutive lines to construct complex sentences involving adverbial or object clauses. By skillfully exploiting the new syntactic possibility of the pentasyllabic form, he succeeded in syncing his poetic line with his reflective process. While today such an artistic syncing of language with inward reflection may be taken for granted, but about 2,000 years ago, it was nothing short of a true poetic revolution. Without it, I believe, pentasyllabic poetry would not have scored an instant hit to become the preferred genre for literati. That's all for today. Next week, we will talk about the new binary structure and multilateral texture in the 1900 poems. I hope you enjoyed the talk. Let us relax and listen to a reading of the poem in Mandarin.
古诗19首，驱车上东门。驱车上东门，遥望郭北墓。白杨何萧萧，松柏夹广路。下有沉死人，杳杳及长木。浅媚黄泉下，千载永不误。浩浩阴阳仪，年命如朝露。人生忽如寄，寿无今时故。万岁更相送，圣贤莫能度。服食求神仙，多为药所误。不如饮美酒，披服晚雨宿。